Just a note, I'm rather sleep deprived and overcompensated with a large amount of coffee. So if you need me to slow down or speed up, just holler. This is Tracing Race at ISU. I'm Hannah Scates Kettler, and what we wanted to do today was to introduce you to this new initiative in the library. Thanks, Erin. So let's start off framing what Tracing Race at ISU is. So it was established and launched this year, brand spanking new, to tell the story of race on campus, broadly speaking. But specifically, it's to reveal the underdocumented history of accomplishment and activism and experience of people of color on campus. It's a library-led initiative, conceived to rely heavily on ISU archives and the digital repository. And I should say we have a lovely moderator, Greg Bailey here, who's from Special Collections. So if you have Special Collections related questions, he's happy to jump in. These projects are meant to present a narrative about the history of race at Iowa State University in a digital format. So the outcomes of this initiative is a type of digital storytelling to be brought about it. And we'll get into what this might look like in a moment. The initiative also is a collective narrative. So it's not just one point of view, one person, one monolithic institutional perspective, so to speak, about what race looked like at Iowa State. It's meant to be a culmination of multiple voices, a collection of multiple voices, and your voices as well to tell the history. It's an iterative multi-year digital project. So we anticipate this being an ongoing initiative, not just something that we're launching in 2021. It's meant to refresh itself periodically. And being this is our first year, this might adjust, but we are anticipating a biannual call for proposals. As we've done this year, there was a call for proposals that will close at the end of the month. And we anticipate doing multiple of those moving forward to solicit additional projects. A little bit more about why this initiative exists. I think we can all speculate why this exists, but specifically the idea is to center the history and experience of communities of color and decenter the institutional perspective, which happens quite a bit in these types of projects across higher education in the US. So this is a little different than some of the ones that you may have run into or experienced before. It's centering communities of color and their voices and their experiences. The initiative is meant to encourage these digital projects, certainly, but not only that. It's one thing to just say we have this wonderful thing that you guys can be a part of, and the outcomes are digital projects. But what I want to make clear here is that it's not just to encourage this kind of research or analysis or presentation and storytelling. It's also meant to support the work that everyone is doing and to facilitate the digital scholarship as well. And that looks like having dedicated resources from the library to help with these specific projects under the Tracing Race initiative. And the purpose is to really engage with the topics that are listed here, race and racism, certainly, inequality, but also activism, and activism of faculty as well as students and staff, which typically get overlooked as well in this in these types of projects. So it's all encompassing activism here. And when we say ISU campus, we're thinking of this not just Ames, if this makes sense. ISU spreads across Iowa with extension and outreach. We're in every county. And so when we think of ISU campus, certainly it's Ames, certainly it's, you know, our footprint, so to speak, but it goes beyond that as well. So when we think of ISU campus, think a little bit more broadly than just the physical bounds of our buildings. So in this initiative, how is it that you might fit in? There are a few opportunities here, and I wanted to make that explicit. So one, of course, is the digital project lead. So you have a research agenda, idea, a project. You can be the lead of that project. Right? That is first and foremost how we see engaging, of course. You would be working with, again, some library folks, certainly, Erin and myself. Greg, you'll likely interact with from special collections, in addition to being supported by folks across campus as well. So we have a lovely advisory board who these folks have been so gracious with their time and to help us, in these inaugural years of tracing race at ISU. That includes Brian Binkin, Teresa Cooper, Susan Vega Garcia, Japana Kellogg, Jose Antonio Rosa, Kenyatta Schumberger, Denise William Colts. And then we have 2 opportunities specifically for students and to be part of the advisory board in the future. If you are seeing yourself in that list, there's opportunity for advisory board members. So that's also a place that you could potentially interact with this project as well. We can't expect those folks to be on it forever, right? So we're expecting some turnover. And so refreshed perspective and voices, and you can be part of that as well. So that's a little bit about, the structure and makeup of Tracing Race at ISU, a little bit about what we've conceived of as this initiative and project moving forward. And I will turn it over to Erin to talk a little bit more about, where we've come from and how we've built this program.
Great, thank you, Hannah. Excuse me. Before we jump into kind of the nuts and bolts of how you might start to develop a project as part of this initiative, I wanted to give a few examples of some projects going on at other institutions that served as inspiration for us in the past year in kind of developing our project plan and having our discussions with the advisory group this past year and deciding how we wanted to structure this project. So the first 2 examples here are examples of larger initiatives that contain smaller individual projects similar to ours. And the second 2 examples here are examples of those individual projects and what they might look like. So I'm just going to click out. This project, University of Richmond Race and Racism Project, is the one that we looked to a lot when we were developing this. I think it's something that kind of parallels our initiative in a lot of ways, and we actually had a chance to talk to one of the advisory members from this project and also the director of the Digital Scholarship Lab at University of Richmond, and he was very helpful to us in having conversations this summer. So this project grew out of actually a class and has since grown into a larger initiative where every summer students propose summer research projects to then be included in the initiative. They have them divided up into a number of different formats. They've got a number of exhibits, podcasts, digital stories, and I believe interactive timelines. They also have an oral history collection. I won't go too deeply into the website here, but this would be a great one to explore if you'd like to get some ideas of what other projects look like. Click out of that one here and go to this next project, which is the Slavery Memory and Reconciliation Project at Georgetown. And this website kind of outlines the larger initiative, which was a long-term process to understand the role of slavery in the history of Georgetown and start to make documents and archival resources available publicly to help people talk about this history. And as part of that, they have this Georgetown Slavery Archive, in which you can access a lot of the documents that this initiative has digitized. So that's another good example if you'd like to explore. As I said, this next project is an example of an individual project. So this is at University of Minnesota. It's called A Campus Divided. It focuses in on a narrow chunk of history between 1930 and 1942, and some specific conflict on campus between students and administrators with opposing political views, and also some kind of active surveillance of students by university administration. And so this project makes archival documents available. And then they've also put together a number of essays interpreting all of these documents. So if you click on an individual document, you can click out to read the essay associated with it. So I think this is a really nice visual and interactive and creative way of putting this history together, and is a good example. And then the last one here is at University of Washington. It was actually put together very recently in response to the murder of George Floyd this past summer, and is an interactive map of a walking tour of University of Washington. And this was actually put together using Timeline.js, which is an open source mapping software from Northwestern University, and has a really easy, it's a really easy point of entry for people and for students. So it's a good platform example. But you can see that if you just click through the map here, you can work your way through this walking tour and also explore the history here deeper. So that's a great example. Okay, so I'm gonna jump right into how could you possibly go about participating in this initiative, getting a project proposal ready, formulating it as a digital project. I want to point to a number of resources that we have put together to help you with this. And one of those is a research guide. So I'm going to click out to that. This is a research guide we've put together specifically for this initiative, but there are a lot of resources here that are more general, specifically the special collections information. I'm going to move right to our special collections page. And this is a good place to go if you have a very general idea of what you might be interested in proposing, or you have no idea what topic you might be interested in, and you're just really looking to see what is available. We've made a number of collections accessible here that we think are good starting places, and that we think are a good representation of what University Archives holds. And if you click on these different links, you'll be taken to the finding aid for that collection, where you can review the information on that collection more closely, and you can actually see what types of materials would be included in each box and folder of that collection. So I want to make clear that these collections that we are showing you here are physical collections held by University Archives. And while you can see the listing of what is in them here online, you will actually have to go to University Archives to view these items in person if you want to review these. But like I said, this is a good place to start. This gives you an idea of collections that University Archives holds that might be interesting to you if you are interested in this project. And the next place to go after you've kind of looked through these materials, you found something that you think might be really interesting to dig into, the next step is to contact special collections and university archives and also review their policies here, especially during COVID. They do have some special policies in place for how to access these collections during COVID, but they have this guide here available to you about how to start doing research with their collections. It has their contact information. It has a little bit more about the mission of special collections, what types of materials you might find there, and then also how to search deeper into university archives. They have a database, and if you'd like to do a little bit deeper subject search, this is your place to go for that. So let's see if we can go back here. The next option is to look into what kinds of resources we do already have digitized. We have a number of collections in our digital repository, in digital collections, and then actually the Ames Tribune is available online through the Ames Public Library. So we have a list of resources here. One I would highlight is the BOM. The student yearbooks are fully digitized and are a great place to find information about individuals, classes, student organizations in the time period that you are interested in. And then a couple examples down here of digital projects that already exist. One of them is the Hbcu Connections project, which was done by a colleague of ours a couple years ago, Shana Destine, where she put together a number of profiles on ISU alumni who went on to do great work at HBCUs after their time at ISU. So this is another great example of a digital project that you could look into. So I want to jump back to my PowerPoint here, make sure that we are hitting all the steps. Yeah, so reviewing the collections that we have available, looking through the special collections guidelines, and then actually reaching out to an archivist if you have questions. They are great at identifying other related collections that you might look into that wouldn't seem obvious to you necessarily. Some of these collections are huge, and your archivists are going to be able to point you in other directions that you might not have known to look. And so reaching out to them is a great idea to help you dig into your research further, and also setting up a time to visit the reading room to actually look at these collections. I'm going to pass it back over to Hannah to talk about how to actually identify a digital tool or methodology for your project.
Yeah, so once you've done the easy task of figuring out a research topic or agenda, the next thing is to think about how am I even going to present this in a digital format? What digital methodology am I going to use in order to conduct my research? So before we jump to the LibGuide, the Digital Scholarship LibGuide, there are a couple questions that we're hoping that this kind of heads off as you're thinking about this. One, what is digital scholarship? If you're entirely new to this idea, there's a little introductory kind of paragraph to explain at least our framing about what digital scholarship is in our context at ISU. There's an ongoing debate that crops up every few years about what is digital scholarship. If you really want to go down that rabbit hole, there's plenty of resources there. But for the sake of just kind of a quick primer, we've provided that for you there. And I will say it's from our perspective. Hopefully it gives you an idea of what kind of appropriate methodologies there are to conduct this type of research. It's not an exhaustive list, it's just a starting point, and certainly the most, I guess I would say, known, established methodologies out there. So you might have a connection or have seen some before. So hopefully it's a little bit more relatable there. Again, not exhaustive. If there are things that you think of that are not on that list, that's totally okay and welcome. And then the other question was, what if I don't know how to use or implement a digital component? So part of that is just, reach out to us. We can certainly help you with that. But there are some tutorials, some how-tos, some resources that we point to that might help with that and getting started on your own. So if we go to the Digital Scholarship LibGuide, Erin, for a second, so you know what it kind of looks like. Again, this first page, when you get there, is this kind of introduction to digital scholarship from Digital Scholarship Initiative's perspective. It also has really great links directly to our digital collections, again, our digital repository, and the ability to request a consult. Important little feature there. If you're thinking about, this project and you're like, I really would like to just talk to someone about this, just click that button. You can request a consult there. Or email Erin. She's totally open to that too. And so the things that you'll see on the left-hand side is additional resources, books, journal articles about digital scholarship, and to kind of get your head more around this concept, if that's something that you want to do. Like again, it's a rabbit hole. There's a lot of stuff here, but what might be the most useful are these the methodologies that are listed here. So using things like oral histories, network analysis, text mining, GIS and geospatial humanities. All of these are potential approaches to any number of these Tracing Race at ISU digital scholarship projects. Again, not exhaustive, but these sections should give you, again, a primer about what this is, examples of projects that are out there that utilize this format or methodology, and any reading, of course, that would be helpful in order to understand, what online exhibits do or can do, what they've resulted in, things like this. So we're hoping you'll find this useful. There's also links to other related LibGuides. So digital scholarship is broad and can sprawl in a lot of different directions, but things that are going to be particularly useful are things like Creative Commons, figuring out what that is, and public domain and how to use that, how to access and use HbCu, which is an open access repository of any number of things, how to do transcription or to facilitate transcription of archival material. And there's a lot of other work being done in different segments of the university, and it pulls these kinds of discussions and resources here for you to explore. So this, again, is just to give you an idea of the potential approaches out there in terms of digital scholarship and the digital projects that we can help you with. But the important thing is, once you have a research topic or question identified, I would encourage you to think about which methodology best supports your research agenda. Don't just pick something that's cool and flashy, because that is super easy to do. If you want to look at how many times, George Washington Carver is mentioned in our archives, the most appropriate approach for that may not be, let me map that, So thinking about what your question is and picking the methodology that best supports your inquiry, because they're all cool, and we can certainly think about all the things that you can do with all the different types of methodologies and platforms. We can do that, but first and foremost, this is meant to help you pick an approach that best supports the research that you want to do.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how to actually submit a proposal, and what types of information you'll need to have kind of gathered together about your project in order to actually submit a proposal to us. So I'm going to click out and show you our electronic submission form. It is available here on our Tracing Race at ISU information page, so that I can drop that in the chat later, or if someone, Greg, if you'd like to drop that link in the chat, perhaps. digital.lib.iastate.edu/tracing-race-ISU is our link there. It's a great idea to review all of the information on this page before you think about submitting a proposal. We've got a lot here about kind of the initiative's philosophy, what kind of values we're hoping to portray with this initiative, and then some answers to some common questions, some of which we've already covered today, but a little bit more about what kind of digital scholarship support you could potentially get and how projects will be selected by the committee. And then if I scroll back up here, this is our link to the electronic form and collecting some basic contact information and kind of your position in the university. We are asking that undergraduate students identify a faculty or staff mentor for their project, kind of similar to how ISCORE does that, I believe. And any additional names and titles of your project partners, if you have them, and a brief bio for each, yourself and also your project partners. We've had this question come up a couple of times. Do you allow projects from outside of Iowa State? And so I will say we allow project partners to be from outside Iowa State, but we would like the primary applicant and the project lead to be a member of the Iowa State community. Here we have space for the project narrative. So what we're asking for here is a description of your research question, your topic, and what the digital component will look like. Also addressing how the format you've chosen for your digital project enhances or allows you to explore your research question further. So here we're asking you to think about what Hannah mentioned earlier. How is this digital representation basically a good fit for your research topic? How does your research question fit into a broader scholarly context? So if you know that, how does your topic fit within a larger conversation? And how will your project advance the understanding of the history of race, racism, and/or social justice at ISU? So we're just asking you to identify how this is going to basically accomplish the mission of the initiative. Next is those value statements on the previous page, inclusivity, transparency, and intersectionality. We just want you to talk a little bit about how your project fits into those initiative values. If you know a list of sources that you would like to consult for this project, we'd like you to identify them. That helps us kind of prepare if your project is selected. It helps us to do some preparation ahead of time for what you might need to access as you start your project. So special collections will have a heads up that they might need to do some preparation on materials for you, or we might have a heads up that if those materials need to be digitized, we can start to prepare for that. So if you do know just basic collections or more specific materials that you will be interested in looking at, please identify those. If you know which digital platform you'd like to use, please identify that here. If you don't know, we can help you with that, but it would be helpful here to say generally what you'd like your platform to be able to do so that we can help you identify what would be a good option there. And then if you have proficiency in the platform that you've identified, that's helpful to us to know too, so that helps us gauge how much support we'll need to give. And then the last question is just about your project timeline. So for this round, Hannah mentioned there will be multiple calls for proposals in the future. For this call, we're asking projects to be completed either in the summer or fall terms. That being said, if you have an idea for a project that's going to take longer than that, we're not disqualifying that. We'd just like to know what you're thinking, how long you think it might take, so that we can consider whether or not we're able to support that. So that's the final question there. We'll jump back over to our PowerPoint. And then just a little bit about the project timeline and what to expect going forward. So our current round of proposals are due March 31st. Our advisory group is going to be reviewing proposals in April and May. And during that time, you can expect me or Hannah to contact you about the technical aspects of your project if we have follow-up questions. And what we're doing there is just gauging, again, how much support your project might need from our team as we look through these proposals. We will notify applicants whether or not they are selected by the end of May. And then we anticipate summer projects beginning in June and fall projects beginning in September. Before we wrap up, Hannah, do you have anything else that you wanted to add?
The only thing I would add is really rely on the consultation opportunities. So there's still time between now and the end of the CFP. If you have an idea, that's really all you need at this point. And we can help craft that idea and scope it so that it can better be articulated in that proposal process. So, articulating which platform we might be able to do that if we're able to speak to you before then, and help scope any timelines and things like this. So we're here if you have questions about a project that you might want to propose. We're certainly here to help facilitate that as well. So thank you all for being here and for checking us out. It's exciting to see so many who are interested in tracing race at Iowa State. So I guess with that, open it up to questions.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for everyone for joining us here. I checked with Hannah and Erin beforehand. You can submit questions through the Hbcu app, the Q&A, or also verbally over your microphone if you prefer to go that way as well. Hannah and Erin said they're okay with that. So far, I have 2 questions in the Q&A right now. The first one is, if you have items that should be in the university archives, how do we go about getting it to you? So I guess I can handle that one since I'm the university archivist and that kind of falls under my domain. Carmen, you can pass those things, get in contact with me, Greg Bailey, university archivist. In the special collections, I oversee the university archives, so materials that would fit into our holdings would just be one of those things, reaching out and coordinating how to get them into the archives and when to get them into the archives. Basically, that's free time when we can make it work. So I can provide you with some contact information for that, for email to get back in contact with me, or a phone call for that. So let's see here.
Oh, thanks, Greg.
Yep.
No, I didn't want to jump. I'm sorry. I thought.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Carmen, I love you. Okay, so anyway, I have a project that is going to be a web-based database. So for ISU inclusion initiatives. And I think that maybe we can do some cross-promoting of folks, but I'm wondering, if a person engages with you, do they get then, if they don't have their own web space for their project, do you provide them a URL or something where they can be housed?
Yes. Short answer. Yes, we do. Yes, and you can request a consult with either Erin or myself, and we'll loop each other in. We see each other quite frequently.
Okay, I'm back now. So one of the other one was Nikki had she asked in the over the mic about her question. She also had submitted that to the question. Another one for the question is, one of my interests has been on how race issues have been addressed in that not always visible part of Iowa State called extension and outreach. If someone wanted to compare and contrast on campus and off campus race issues handling, could it be done using university archives materials? That's a good question. I think there might be some materials within the university archives to look at. Unfortunately, with the size of extension, a lot of times the records that are produced by extension, like internal records, like correspondence from directors and things like that, are not always sent to the archives. It's one of those things I'd like to reach out to a lot of these different extension offices to bring those into the archives. So as of right now, there's not a huge amount of for individual extension offices from around the state in the archives. There is probably some materials that we could look into that and try and help locate for that purpose, for your research to look into that. I think that would be a interesting aspect as well. With that, because again, back with staff is one of those things that is very underrepresented when folks look at any aspect of the university's histories, across all spectrums of people, that staff are largely overlooked, unfortunately. It's usually faculty, students, and administrative personnel are the ones who are mostly covered in that type of thing. So Jose, I think it would be something we'd have to talk a little bit about more, and getting in contact and try and see what we could flush out of what we have in our holdings, and also what we might have to reach out to some of the extension office to see what they might have there as well.
I think this brings up a really good point and something that we've talked about this initiative, that we know that there's going to be interest in topics that we don't currently have materials in our archives to support. We know that's the case. And what we're hoping, if that happens, is that these projects will start to open those conversations. So before, Greg might not have prioritized or known to go to extension and look for a specific set of materials or see if they still exist there as a donation. But if there's interest shown through a project proposal here or through one of the conversations that you have with us here, that can help us start to prioritize those conversations in other departments and try and get materials. So that being said, there might not immediately be materials to support your proposal in that round. And it might be a case where we have to go out and look, we have to find things and you might have to go out and look as well. And it would be eligible for a project in another round. But we're hoping that this will, in addition to getting projects off the ground, it will also open conversations to be getting more materials into the archives and available.
Right, and I also would say with that as well is that if folks are going out and they're conducting research on these areas, and say you're conducting oral histories with an underrepresented population that we might not have a similar oral history from those individuals done, those things would be very much accepted into the archives. We would look to do that. I think we would just want to make sure that the proper releases and all the forms were taken care of beforehand so we can make them available to future researchers. So at the same time too, if folks are out there and they have contacts with folks in different communities around the state or anything like that, they may have been involved in a student organization or a student movement that we don't have, but with their research, they've uncovered those folks, and they have, you know, documents or photographs and things like that from a movement. They would be also be one of those things we'd love to have in the archives to help be able to support that story and have that for future researchers to tell that story as well. Carmen had a follow-up question, and she asked, do you think that this initiative has the potential to broaden the greater university's storytelling?
Yes, that's one of the things that we're really excited about as part of this project. Like I mentioned, it could as easily have been something where the library was like, we should tell the history of race at ISU. Let's do that. And we present, you know, this singular point of view about the history of race and racism on campus and leave it at that. Instead, what we're doing and what really excites us about this is that there's an opportunity for so many more voices and vantages, so many more perspectives and input by supporting and soliciting projects from across campus. Again, across those three segments of faculty, students, and staff. This has the opportunity to really expand the legacy and history and experience and overall narrative of what Iowa State University is and has been. So I guess I would say I just got goosebumps thinking about all the different things that could come out of this. It's not an understatement. It's something that we're really excited about, is really broadening the scope and the potential voices in that story being told.
So yeah, I think as well with that, the aspect of being able to tell that wider story, I think, you know, everyone knows George Washington Carver and Jack Trice. Those stories are told over, you know, those are widely known by everyone at Iowa State and even people outside of Iowa State, you know. So I think that this project has the opportunity to share more than just Jack Trice and George Washington Carver. It could be any number of folks that have done great things at this university through research or just their experience here at ISU, and, you know, social movements and things like that, social justice, to move that forward at ISU. I think this project has a great opportunity to tell those untold stories that have been lost to time, and we can promote those and show the good things that have happened, and also conversely some of the bad things that have happened here. I mean, I don't think this project, as Hannah and Erin can also attest, that is always just has to be the shiny, bright, great things that have gone on here, right? We want people to not just be thinking that only has to be the story, that it's the broader story of what has gone on at the university. So.
Yeah, I think the words we use are difficult histories. Like it's a thing and we're expecting it, and supportive of that too.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yep.
Can you speak a bit to what funding for students look like? Is there the opportunity for course credit? Are there buyouts for faculty? Any of those types of things? Can you just talk about that aspect a bit?
Erin, do you want to talk? I can do it. It's fine.
So I can say a little bit about student support right now. So we do have specific funds dedicated from the provost to support student work. Right now, we are trying to determine whether that looks like hourly student employment to work on a project, or we're hoping to have a stipend structure to support a student project. So a set amount where we won't have to be tracking kind of hourly student employment. We don't have that quite figured out yet, but we will say that there's funds available to support either undergraduate or graduate student work on these projects.
Mhm.
Hannah, do you want to talk about that?
There's also in mid-February, the honors also released a opportunity for financial support, though not directly tied to tracing race, would be applicable to the things that the outcomes of this project too. I can find the link to that because I'm not recalling the name off the top of my head, but there is some funding there for faculty and students. Just give me a second, I'll post it in the chat.
Folks, it looks we have about 3 more minutes. So if there's any more questions, please get them out. We can probably do maybe one more. Also want to take this time to ask that those who sat in on the session today fill out the survey. You can access it by scrolling down on the left-hand side in the Hbcu app. It's under surveys or rate this session. If you could do that, it would be greatly appreciated. So giving feedback on today's session. Thank you.
I just posted that link to the honors awards as a potential there too. And we've spoken with honors too, so they're aware, we're aware, we can collaborate, we'll figure it out. If it's something that you're interested in applying for too, we can talk to you about that. Sorry, it looks like Nikki also mentioned when the Inclusion Initiatives grant is back online next year, that may be an opportunity for staff faculty funding as well. Thank you.
And Nikki also dropped the link, I think, for that into the chat as well. So folks want to take a look at that as well. Wesley had another question about, are those grants available to alumni? Nick, do you have any insight on that?
Yep. So no, they aren't. But like this project, if there's a champion who is currently on campus that an alumni wants to work with, that person would be our primary applicant and our PI, if you will. So not currently, Wesley, but who knows? Maybe with your suggestion, we might change that up.
The last thing I would say is, one thing. If you're thinking of a project, the other thing I should say with digital projects at other institutions, typically it's you work with a shop that is like, well, do you have a grant to do this? I would say you don't need funding to do this. You might want funding to support yourself, and that's legit. Go for it. But in terms of working with us, you don't need to bring money to us in order to work on these projects. We won't turn it down if you have a project that's funded by the NSF or something, but it's not required.
All right, I think that's puts us at time for today. Gives folks a little bit of time to get to the next session. So thanks, Hannah and Erin, for presenting.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, y'all. Put in a proposal.